Those of you that have been listening to this show for a while know that I love talking about metabolisms and that I'm a huge proponent of optimizing your metabolic health first and foremost. And for those of you that are new to the show, welcome. This show is a champion of healthy, thriving, roaring metabolisms. In fact, I believe this to be the foundational key to healthy aging and developing and maintaining a lifelong, lean, healthy body. But all that being said, what the heck is a metabolism anyway? And how can you tell if yours is broken? And if it is broken, how would you go about fixing it? If it's true that an optimal metabolism is the cornerstone to your healthy body composition goals, exactly how would you go about optimizing it? Stick around, we have a fun conversation today on all things metabolic. Hello and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Show. I'm your host, Kevin English. I'm the founder of The Silver Edge, and our mission is to help you build and maintain a lean, healthy body that you love for the rest of your life, so you can show up in life as the healthiest, strongest, most vital version of yourself. We have a great show for you today. New York Times bestselling author Dr. Ian Smith is here, and he's going to help us develop metabolic flexibility. But before we get to that, I want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Levels. Levels is my absolute favorite protein powder. I love them for their commitment to high-quality supplements with minimal ingredients. They give you all the good stuff without any of the junk that's found in so many supplements today. No sugar, soy, gluten, artificial sweeteners, fillers, or proprietary blends. Their grass-fed whey is my go-to protein powder. It tastes great, and it is a fantastic source of clean protein. You can check them out over at silveredgepartners.com. Just click on the Levels icon. And because you're a listener of this show, you can get 20% off your first order when you use coupon code KEV20 at checkout. Again, that's silveredgepartners.com, and be sure to use coupon code KEV20, that's KEV20, all run together at checkout. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with today's show. My guest today is Dr. Ian Smith. Dr. Ian is a New York Times bestselling author, a speaker, and a media personality who's appeared on such shows as The Oprah Winfrey Show, The View, Dr. Oz, Anderson Cooper 360, and many, many more. Join us today as Dr. Ian helps us understand what a metabolism is, what its role is in obtaining and maintaining a lean, healthy body composition, and how to become metabolically flexible. I started our conversation by asking Dr. Ian how he got interested in health and fitness.
Well, I've always been an athlete since I was a little kid. So I've always been serious about sports and athleticism. And so it's just really been kind of my entire life of exercising, eating the best I could, understanding the body and how the body is able to perform at peak performance. All those issues were always important to me since a young boy. And it's interesting because I'm dating myself, but when I was a kid, Sports Illustrated at the time was an extremely influential magazine for athletes. And so I would read these articles all the time. As soon as the issue came out, I'd go through it. But I was most inspired by the articles that talked about the work that athletes did in order to reach the level of success that they had achieved. And, I remember reading about Ivan Lendl, and, I would love the nuances. It would say that the great tennis player Ivan Lendl, who was the great champion at the time, the way he actually trained on a bicycle, he pedaled in a certain way to give himself extra work. So these kinds of concepts and these nuances really fascinated me as a young boy. And then, I always wanted to be a physician. And so I kind of moved naturally into becoming a doctor. But I always have had this love and this engagement with sports and my physical well-being. So it's just natural for me to actually end up writing about something that I've led and have dealt with most of my life, which is how to be physically fit, how to get the most out of life, how to be as healthy as possible and still have fun, but also how to reach your goals from a physical standpoint. Me writing books in this particular discipline has just been a natural evolution of my own life.
Great. All right. So it sounds like obviously then you've been active your whole life and you've just followed your passion then. So are you also a practicing physician at this time? I know you're quite the author at this point.
Yeah, no, I don't practice medicine. I am mostly an author. I
Uh-huh.
also do appearances and, I'm a TV personality. So I do not have a medical
Yeah.
practice. I wouldn't be able to write as much as I do. I also write mysteries. So I wouldn't be able to do all the writing that I do, as well as do my TV appearances if I had a practice. But in many respects, given social media and my access to millions of people so easily, that has become kind of my practice in the sense of I have people who are
Right.
always online asking me questions or asking me basics of how to lose weight, how to improve metabolism, what's the best source of lean protein, things like that. So, in many ways, I have a practice of helping the general public, and it has been a very gratifying career.
Fantastic. All right. Well, you had just mentioned metabolism there, that people reaching out asking how can they optimize their metabolism. So that's a perfect segue into what I really want to talk to you about, right? You got a new book out. It's called the Metflex Diet, Burn Better Fuel, Burn More Fat. I think most people listening, we're down for that, right? We want to burn better fuel. We certainly want to burn more fat. We want to be all the things that you said, right? We want to be healthy. We want to be active. We want to be strong. We want to be vital as we age. So let's start here. What the heck is a metabolism anyway?
A metabolism really is a collection of processes that occur inside of your body to keep you alive and require energy, which is in the form of calories in order to operate. That's really kind of basically what your metabolism is. What is going on in your body that demands you to consume energy to be able to fuel those particular processes that are occurring? So, even if you're lying in your bed sleeping at night, your heart is beating, your lungs are beating, and there are billions of processes, even while sleeping, that are occurring every second inside of your body. Well, they require energy. And there are different ways that we supply that energy, but they require energy. And that process of your body doing things and your cells doing things requiring energy, that's called your metabolism. I like to liken it almost as like a fireplace. You know, your metabolism basically is how much and burning calories. If you have a huge fireplace, you can load a lot of wood in that fireplace, and therefore you can burn a lot more logs. And the bigger your metabolism is, it's like having a bigger fireplace, and you can get through more logs, or in our case with the body, you can get through more calories. And most times, those calories, of course, are in the form of food. Food calories are energy. And so when we say this has 150 calories, we're talking about units of energy that's contained inside the food that once you consume, your body needs to do something with it. And so that's what really metabolism is. There's another thing that people should understand, which is something called your BMR, which is your basal metabolic rate. Your BMR is basically how much energy you need in order to supply your body with a basic level of existence. We're not talking about running or playing sports or driving your car. If you were just to sit down all day, you're going to burn calories. How many calories would you need to eat or consume in order to supply the body with enough energy just to be able to sit all day and live and breathe and maybe talk? That's your BMR. And so we all have a BMR, and that BMR is different for everybody. Some have big BMRs, some have smaller BMRs. But that's an important thing that people have to understand, that even if you are not doing anything, your body is still burning calories. Your metabolism is still active, and your metabolism still needs to be fed with energy.
Okay, so we then can understand that this metabolism is obviously a vastly complex cellular process, and we have all this, there's catabolic processes and anabolic, so we're constantly breaking things down and building things up. But we could simplify that for just the layperson listening. This is the rate that we're burning calories, right? And this is how we're converting food into energy and building muscle and breaking down food into components that we can use to fuel ourselves, right? Ourselves, right? And then you had mentioned this BMR, this basal metabolic rate, which is just the amount of calorie burn we need just to survive, right? That doesn't take into account lifting weights or running or doing strenuous activity. And you had mentioned you used the example of a fireplace. We want the biggest fireplace we can get, right? We want to burn as many calories at rest. We want the biggest BMR we can have. Is that a fair way of saying that?
Well, unfortunately, your
Okay, so
BMR,
that,
you can't really change your BMR. Your BMR is basically defined by your genetics. This is going to be your height. This is going to be your eye color without putting on color contacts. There's certain things that your genes say, this is what you're going to have. So your genes say, this is going to be your BMR. That's different than your overall metabolism. BMR is part
got
of
it.
your overall metabolism. So there are things you can do to increase your overall metabolism, okay, outside of your BMR that would get your total metabolic rate up. So there are things that we can do that we can adjust. Unfortunately, we can't adjust it as much as we'd like. And unfortunately, some of those adjustments are just temporary, which means you have to keep doing them. For example, exercise. Exercise is one of the best ways to increase your metabolic rate. However, once you finish exercising, the amount of boost you just got to your metabolism, the rate starts decreasing over time until you exercise again. And that's why you need to have, we talk about lifestyle behaviors, lifestyle changes. That's why you need to have regular exercise in your life, because regular exercise in your life for many other reasons, but for this particular reason, at this point in the discussion, regular exercise will allow you to keep elevating that metabolism, which will allow you to keep requiring energy, which will allow you to be able to burn the foods that you have. And in some instances, you won't just be burning foods, but if you're doing a little bit of intermittent fasting, not to dump too much stuff in at once, but if you're doing some fasting, instead of burning the food, you're going to now start burning your fat. And so there are things you can do to increase your overall metabolism, and those things need to be done on a routine basis.
Okay, and we're going to unpack all of that because that's the meat of what I want to talk to you about. But before we get there, let's back up. So those of us over 50, we may be thinking, well, you had mentioned genetics in there, and certainly a lot of us may have heard that, well, I'm 50, I'm 60, and my metabolism is just slow to a crawl because that's what happens as we get older. And that used to be, I think, what the science suggested. That's not really what we think anymore. What does the science support in terms of metabolism, metabolic rate as we age?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I've been doing this long enough where that was the prevailing thought. The prevailing thought was that at about the age of 30, everyone's metabolism starts to slow down. And the older you get, the slower it gets, and it just gets bad. Well, we believed that for a very long time, and we're only as good as the latest research, right? So I don't fault us for believing that. However, you're better when you take into account new research, which is what I'm always trying to do. And research changes, by the way. People have to understand that science is not a linear process. It's not a binary process where it's this or that. It's not always concrete. Science evolves. And that just happens. So the evolution now, and I mentioned this in the book in chapter 1, there's a little section on metabolism, but the evolution now says to us that instead of there just being age of 30, metabolism goes down, there are now 4 stages of metabolism, right? So there's a stage from your infancy when you're born up to age 1, and that's when you really are burning a lot of calories because you're growing, you just got out of the womb. And so you have all these things that are going on now that they weren't going on before. And that's typically 50% above the adult rate. That's how much your metabolism is moving from an infant to 1. Then from the age of 1 to 20, your metabolism gradually slows by approximately 3% a year. Okay. So your slowing doesn't start at 30. Your slowing actually starts
right. It's at 1.
Age 1, right? And then despite us believing that 30 was the cliff where you drop off all of a sudden, we now realize that between the ages of 20 and 60, your metabolism is pretty stable, actually. So it actually, I don't mean to bust people's bubbles, but everyone who's been saying, oh, I'm 45, so my metabolism is really in the toilet. Well, actually, between 20 and 60, you're pretty stable. And then at the age of 60, for those who say, well, I'm 70 now, or I'm 65, so my metabolism really is in trouble. Actually, your decline is only about 0.7% per year. So the new data says to us that it's not all about, your inability to lose weight or all of your weight gain is not just an issue of a bad metabolism or a slowing metabolism. That's not really the case. It's also an issue of an accumulation of maybe behaviors that are not lending themselves or lending you to be able to lose weight, maintain weight, and it's causing weight gain.
Yeah, 100%. So there's a lot of good news in there, right? So as we start to unpack that, we can understand that, okay, so if my metabolism isn't just doing this nosedive, right, as I age, but in fact is rather steady, or, you know, for those of us over 60, that very small decline after that, then really that means there's a lot of things that are in my control to speed up our metabolism. Now, before we talk about ways to optimize our metabolism, let's talk a little bit about, I'd like to start maybe with metabolic. A lot of our folks here have heard probably metabolic syndrome or metabolic diseases. Talk a little bit about what happens when our metabolism is out of whack. What do we mean when we say things like metabolic syndrome?
Yeah, well, I talk about that in the book also, and people have to understand that when you say metabolic, it just is not always your metabolism. Metabolic also refers to other processes, metabolic processes that occur in the body. And people need to make that distinction. And it's important because when you make that distinction, you end up, that's going to get into our conversation about metabolic flexibility. But metabolic syndrome is a constellation of illnesses that can occur for various reasons, but can have detrimental effects on the body. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to avoid putting ourselves into a metabolic syndrome-like state. And one of my emphasis of the MetFlex diet and metabolic flexibility is to avoid the metabolic syndrome that people who get into a metabolic syndrome find themselves gaining weight. They find their blood sugars out of control. They find themselves having high cholesterol, high blood pressure. These are all things that when people are experiencing metabolic syndrome that they may experience. And so metabolic syndrome is a metabolic state that occurs when your metabolism is out of whack. And our metabolism becomes out of whack for various reasons.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you mentioned some of those earlier, right? This is when we look at dysregulated metabolism, really what we're looking at is poor lifestyle behaviors, right? So you had mentioned some of the, you know, the obesity, the prediabetes, diabetes, the blood pressure, high blood pressure, the poor cholesterol markers. All of these things are signs of poor metabolic health, and they're signs typically of poor lifestyle choices. Now, on the other side of that coin, how do we define an optimal metabolism? What is somebody, I would imagine that's just somebody who's got great health, right? But how do we define, what can we say about the person who has optimal metabolisms?
I'm going to ask you to look at it a little differently. What we want to think is our way of living supported by our metabolism? Okay. So, because what happens is, and I tend to be a proactive person, but what I don't want to give people an impression is that I'm going to make this easy. Let's say someone has a metabolism of 1,000 and they want a metabolism of 2,000. Well, not everyone's going to be able to increase their metabolism from 1,000 to 2,000, number one. And number two, if you are able to increase it from 1 to 2,000, the question is how long can it stay at 2,000? It can't stay at 2,000. Whatever you're doing to get at 2,000 has to continue. And so that's obviously an untenable situation. So I don't want people to feel like, what is an ideal metabolism? What I want people to think about is, what are they doing from a lifestyle behavioral standpoint that matches what their metabolic abilities are, right? So if you're able to, if you have a BMR, let's put this in numbers to make it simple. Let's say you have a BMR of 500, okay? And let's say you exercise and you walk around and you eat and you talk and all these daily function of living. Let's say you're able to get your overall metabolism up to 1,000. So our BMR is 500. The things that we do on our own has boosted another 500. So now our metabolic rate for the day is 1,000. Okay. So we're able to control 500, a half of our overall metabolism. Now the question becomes, are we eating within the confines that will work with the 1,000 metabolic rate? So if you're burning 1,000 calories in a day and you're eating 2,500 calories in a day, you now have a surplus, an excess of 1,500 calories. And so I would say to you, yes, you can still try to boost your metabolism, but you have an easier and greater gain by reducing how many calories you're putting into your system. That's easier. You have more control over that. And it's right. And it doesn't require as much work, right? Because if you want to go from, let's say we're at 1,000, but you want to go to 1,500, the extra 500 calories you that you want to burn off to increase your rate may require you, for example, to be on a treadmill for 4 hours to burn those 500 calories. So
and to your point, the minute you stop doing that, you stop getting those effects, right? You start getting those benefits. So that's you got to decide, do I want to be on a treadmill 4 hours a day every day for the rest of my life, right?
So I rather tell you, hey, let's cut out a large fry today. Let's cut that out rather than say we have to be on a treadmill for 4 hours. And so I think that's the mindset and the perspective that people should take when they're trying to make these changes that will give them results.
Sure, 100% with you. And I think what you're saying also is that our metabolism isn't a set thing, right? It's something that's constantly adjusting, right? Its job is to keep us alive, and so it's constantly trying to do that. So as it speeds up, it's doing that in response to things that you are doing. And when it slows down or when it becomes broken, right? You hear people say, oh, my metabolism is broken. It's not probably, I mean, unless it's a very rare case, it's probably not broken. It's doing what it perceives it needs to do in order to keep you alive. So when you do a crash diet, it's going to slow way down because it's perceiving food scarcity, right? And that's its job. Go ahead.
It's very important for people to understand that just because the metabolism has slowed doesn't mean there's something bad happening or that your metabolism is broken. Like you said, your metabolism is constantly adjusting and evolving based on environmental conditions. If you are someplace where it's really hot versus cold, your metabolism changes, right? You don't want to, if you're in a hot environment, you don't want to burn, right? You're already hot. If you're in a cold environment, you want to produce heat, something called thermogenesis. So part of metabolism means to increase heat also inside of the body. So there are all kinds of ways in which your metabolism adjusts to your environment. I just want to make that point that a slow metabolism, if it's slow because it's reacting to a condition, does not mean that it's broken. If you are not seeing food, right? Let's say you haven't eaten in a while. Your body says, whoa, I don't have any energy coming in on a regular, steady basis. Therefore, the energy I do have already in my body, I need to save it. I have to conserve it so I can kind of distribute it slowly so I don't run out of energy. Your metabolism is going to slow down. That's a compensatory response. It's a way that your body is adjusting to the environment.
100%. And it adjusts in both directions, right? So we regularly do, say, strength training, right? As opposed to, you had mentioned 4 hours on the treadmill, but we do, say, specifically strength training to build that type 2 muscle mass. It is more metabolically expensive, right? And so again, it's not something you can do for 6 weeks and then stop and enjoy the metabolism building effects there. But if it's something you regularly do throughout your life, then that is something that will help adjust it upwards, as well as, of course, when we do other things. So that the metabolism is constantly seeking some sort of stasis, and its job is to keep you alive, right?
Yes. And I'm glad that you said that about the muscle, for example. My next book for next year, hopefully, will be a book that is teaching people not just how to burn fat, but also how to build muscle, particularly people over 50. I'm over 50. Okay. Right on. And I'm still building muscle. I think building muscle is very underrated for people who are over 50. People tend to think that
I'm 100% with you there. Yes.
People tend to think that, well, I'm over 50, which means I really need to focus on my cardio and walking and running. Cardio is great, but don't ignore the need for a better lean mass, to have more muscle. It's extremely important for all kinds of reasons. But for this part of the conversation, it's important because muscle is more metabolically active than anything else. What does that mean? That means that when you have muscle, it's like a fireplace. The more skeletal muscle you have, the bigger your fireplace, which means the more wood it takes to make that fireplace completely robust. So people who have more muscle have a higher metabolism, and therefore they burn calories faster, and they also can eat more because they're burning more of it off. So muscle mass is extremely important as we age for a multitude of reasons, but particularly because it's a great way of increasing our metabolism. And one more thing on this, people always say, well, why do men lose weight faster than women? If you take a man and a woman, equal height, equal weight, this is a genetic issue. Men are going to have more muscle mass than women. That's just how we're built. Okay. And so a man eating the same foods, exercise, everything the same exercise, same sleep, a man will lose weight faster simply because he has more muscle mass, and that muscle mass makes his metabolism faster, and therefore he's burning calories faster. So he's going to lose weight faster. And that's another reason why I say to people who are over the age of 50, first of all, anybody, but particularly people over the age of 50, that you have to work on building your muscle mass through resistance training.
Right. Talking to you ladies out there as well, right? To your point, males typically have an easier time losing weight than females because they have more of that metabolically expensive muscle. And it's like you said, we want roaring furnaces, right? We want that big fireplace. We want to be chucking big logs in there. And it was Dr. Gabriel Lyon who said that muscle is the organ of longevity, that just that primacy of muscle, specifically that type 2 muscle you get from resistance training. Nothing crazy. We're not talking about 7 days a week of bodybuilding, but just 3-4 days of 45 minutes of resistance training, something simple like that. All right. I absolutely love it. That's right in my wheelhouse. Glad you brought that up. So Dr. Ian, let's get into the fun stuff here. So you got this new book, MetFlex, that's short for metabolic flexibility. What the heck is that, and why should we care?
Metabolic flexibility is a term that I came across about a year and a half ago. I mean, it's been around a little longer than that, but I was just reading on something, and as I dissected it, it was really intriguing to me. What metabolic flexibility says is this: the two major sources of fuel for the body are fat and sugar, carbs, okay? Those are also 2 macronutrients. So we have 3 macronutrients, right? We have fat, carbs, and protein. So when people say macros, they're talking about those 3 large macronutrients. And the reason why we call them macronutrients is because our body needs them in macro supply. We need large amounts of fats, large amounts of carbs, and large amounts of protein. Okay. So, but the 2 biggest fuel sources for our body are the fats and the carbs. However, the question is whether or not your body is able to efficiently and effectively burn the carbs when they are ingested, and then turn around and burn the fats when they are ingested. So metabolic flexibility says this: if you are metabolically flexible, you are able to burn efficiently whichever fuel source you are consuming. If you're eating a lot of carbs, your body burns it well. If you're eating a lot of fats, your body burns it well. If you're eating carbs and fats, your body burns them well. Liken it to a hybrid car versus a gas-powered car. A hybrid car is fueled by electricity, battery, and fueled by gas. A fully powered gasoline car only is fueled by gasoline combustion engine, okay? Now, the hybrid car, once the battery runs out, it then turns to gas. That is a great example of metabolic flexibility. The car adapts to whatever fuel source is available. The gas-only powered car, once that gas runs out and the tank is empty, a car won't run until you go to the gas station and fill it back up with new gas. That is a metabolically inflexible condition. You can only do one thing. You can only burn off of the gas. So what we're trying to do with our bodies in my new book, The MetFlex Diet, is we're trying to teach our bodies how to become a hybrid car. How do you burn all the fuels, particularly the fats and the carbs, that you're going to be able to see? Because the vast majority of people, unfortunately, are metabolically inflexible. They can burn carbs really well, or they can burn fats really well, but they can't switch from one to the other in a fast, efficient manner. And that's what this 6-week program does. it makes your body more metabolically flexible. And one more thing, people who have said for years that, I've tried every plan, I can't lose weight, or they'll say, every time I eat carbs, I gain weight, I hold on to water. What people are not realizing is that the reason why they're not losing weight, many people, not everyone, but many people aren't losing weight effectively is because they're metabolically inflexible. It's not that they're eating bad foods. It's not that their exercise isn't good. It's simply that they have not been able to change that switch, that metabolic switch that allows them to burn their fuel better.
Okay, gotcha. So we got these two primary fuel sources, right? We got fat, we got carbs. I think most people probably know, carbs are your go. Of course, if I have excess carbs, my metabolism wants to keep me alive. It's like, hey, excess carbs, we'll store these for fat for later. We're going to need these in case there's food scarcity. Unfortunately, there's not much food scarcity for most of us these days, so that can lead to some problems. All right, so I love the example of the hybrid carb being able to switch back and forth. Makes perfect sense. I'd love for my body to be able to burn both carbs and fat as needed. So that begs the big question here. How do we improve metabolic flexibility? What are some of the tools that we have, some of the levers we can pull in order to improve this flexibility?
Great question. So in the book, I not only do I explain to you what your metabolic flexibility is, but I also explain to you what are some of the ways to improve it. So in chapter 2, page 13, exercise, intermittent fasting, something called cyclical ketosis, better sleep hygiene, and changing your dietary patterns. But the program focuses on the first three: exercise, intermittent fasting, and cyclical ketosis. So exercise we already talked about. The reason why exercise is great at improving your metabolic flexibility is because it increases our metabolism and it increases the demand that we have on energy. And if we're exercising and increasing our metabolism and we're demanding energy, the body will take energy because the body needs it and is desperate. It'll take it from anywhere. If you give it fat, it'll take the energy from fats. If you give it sugar, it'll take the energy from sugar, carbs. Wherever it comes, the body will take it. So that is one of the important parts of exercise. And research has shown that exercise is very good at improving your metabolic flexibility. The next thing is intermittent fasting. And we could do a whole talk on intermittent fasting, which we won't do right now. But basically, what intermittent fasting is saying is that we are going to put your body into periods of fasting, not starvation, but fasting. And so we are going to eat some, and then we're going to not eat some. And that period of fasting, of not eating too much, that period of fasting, what we do is we create basically an artificial state of lack of energy. And so we're not consuming food or as much food, and therefore the energy that we typically would get from food, we're not getting it. But the body's requirement has still stayed the same, right? Let's put it in numbers. I like numbers. Let's say the body says, I need 800 calories, 800 units of energy in order to do what I need to do, okay? And you consume 400 units of energy, 400 calories. Well, you now have a 400 calorie delta difference. Where are you going to get those extra 400 calories that your body says it still needs? We get them from fat. So your body during your fasting period will then find those 400 calories by going into your fat stores, because fat is a storage form of energy. Your body will go into your fat stores, break down the fat, extract that energy, and now you got your 400, and so now you have the 800. So intermittent fasting is important because it allows your body to eat up those carbs when you eat it, whatever carbs you're eating, but then your body has to start eating fat because there's no other fuel source, and so that improves it. The last thing is something called cyclical ketosis, and everyone has heard of keto, basically, but ketosis basically is you're putting your body into an artificial biochemical or biophysiological state where you are not consuming a lot of carbs, but you're consuming a lot of fats, and fats are able to be converted into something called ketone bodies, which is where we get keto from. So you take fat, you convert it to this form called ketone bodies, and you put your body in a state of ketosis, a state where you have a lot of ketone bodies floating around in your system. And then your body uses the ketone bodies for energy, not carbs anymore, because we're not eating that many carbs. Your body uses those ketone bodies in the state of ketosis. But here's the rub. Here's the new twist to it. Cyclical ketosis means that instead of staying in a ketotic state all the way through, you go into keto and out of keto, into keto and out of keto. And it is believed that by going in and out of keto, that you will improve your metabolic flexibility. That's a lot, I know.
Okay. Yeah, no, that is a lot. And certainly, yeah, we could do a whole episode on each one of those things, right? The intermittent fasting, cyclical ketosis, all that. Of course, you had mentioned improving sleep, one of my favorite subjects there. I believe that's kind of the foundation for a lot of over 50 health, dietary pattern shifts. But I just want to unpack a little bit of that, right? Just like we had said that, well, in order for me to get the lifelong metabolic benefits of resistance training, of this additional muscle I'm building, can the same be said then for, because you just brought up some intermittent fasting, cyclical ketosis, are these lifestyle changes I'm making for the rest of my life in order to have this metabolic flexibility, or am I doing this for a period of time to quote unquote get me unstuck? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. For sure, you need to do it. I'm saying 6 weeks in my program, the MetFlex diet, but you need to do it for a certain period of time for sure to become unstuck. I like that. To become unstuck, to allow that switch to move better. The question is,
right,
what do you need to do to keep that switch moving nicely and being well oiled? My argument is that these things that we're talking about, intermittent fasting is not something that is harmful. It is not something that is overly strenuous, and it is a way that you can eat for the rest of your life. And to be honest with you, most people are already doing intermittent fasting and don't even realize it. You know, they're doing it. They don't know they're doing it. So it's not like, I know it sounds like a really fancy, maybe to some it sounds extreme because the word fasting in there, but it's not. When you go to sleep, you're fasting. You're not eating when you're sleeping. Yeah. So if you're sleeping for 8 to 10 hours, you are fasting for 8 to 10 hours. I mean, simple as that. And intermittent fasting.
Your biology's built that in, right? Yeah.
Built it in. Yeah. So when you start eating in the morning, that is your feeding window. And then you're going to fast when you go to sleep. So I think that intermittent fasting is something that people are already doing now and don't realize it. I think that they could sharpen it a little better and be a little more focused with it. But that's something you can do forever. I do it, and I do it sometimes just subconsciously. Like I don't eat until a certain time in the morning typically, and my body's used to it. I don't have to eat when I wake up in the morning. I could go 2 or 3 hours without even feeling the impulse to eat because my body is trained to say, okay, we're going to start eating around 10 o'clock. Okay. Now, the other important part I think that people should understand is the cyclical keto is something that you also can do for the rest of your life because you have carb loading and then you have a lot of heavy fat days. Now, you may decide to change the recipe that I've given you. I give you 2 days of carb loading, eating lots of carbs, pasta, pizza, bread, for 2 days, and then you're doing your keto for 5 days. You may decide, well, I want to do 3-4. I want to do 3 days of carb loading, 4 days of keto. You know, to some degree, it's customizable. So the simple answer to your question is these 3 things, including the better sleep hygiene, which we haven't talked about, but these things are things that you really can incorporate to your daily regimen for the rest of your life. They're not onerous. They're not something you're going to get exhausted from it. You know, it's not going to happen. Now, if you go to the extremes of these things, if you do intermittent fasting, whereby your fasting period where you're not eating is 16 hours, which some people do, by the way, then that may exhaust you. After a while, you may say, geez, you know, not eating for 16 hours a day and only eating for 8 hours a day is exhausting to me, and I can't sustain that for the long term. That's different.
No, very well said. I love that. I love the way that you talk about using these tools in the toolbox to get quote unquote unstuck. And then we're all bio-individual, right? See how your body reacts. How did this feel for you? I love the idea of doing a 6-week program because I'm a big fan of self-experimentation. And I know we only have a little bit of time left here, but I'd love to just briefly run over each of those 6 steps. You got the fundamental, the adaptation, conversion. Would you mind kind of walking us quickly through your 6-week program, and then we'll kind of wrap up from there?
Sure. So the first week, I think the first week of any program is critical, obviously, because it's basically getting you into the groove. So I call it fundamental because we're now laying a foundation. And this first week is going to use a little bit of intermittent fasting where we break up the day into eating and fasting. But it's also going to use a little bit of clean eating, okay, trying to eat less processed foods, but you're also going to eat a lot of carbs. So this is a pretty carb heavy period on purpose, by the way. And that's what week 1 is. And people like week 1 because it's not much different than what they're typically eating already. But week 1, and people start losing weight. I mean, I have a Facebook group, by the way. People listening should join that Facebook group. It's called Metflex Diet on Facebook, the name of the group. And I Zoom with everyone twice a week for free and help people out. But we go through the program. And so some people have done this program early before the book came out. I gave them access to it. People lose on the whole program up to 20 pounds, by the way. But week 1, there are people who've lost 4 or 5 pounds. I mean, a lot of weight. That's a lot of weight. And then we go to week 2. Week 2 is called adaptation. During adaptation, I believe, is that after that week and into this week, your body's now going to start adapting to this new way of eating if you haven't been eating like this. And most people have not been eating this way. Your body now starts making adaptation, which is good. You want your body to adapt and accommodate and acclimatize, as they say when they're mountaineering and they're summiting peaks of mountains. You got to acclimatize. That's the process of acclimatizing to what you're now eating and how you're moving. Then week 3 is conversion. Week 3 is when we start the other part of the program. We're going to change the type of intermittent fasting that you're doing. So there are 3 types of intermittent fasting. There is the time-restricted feeding, where you're breaking the day up into 2 periods, eating and fasting. Then there's the 5-2 method, where you have 5 days of relatively normal eating and 2 days of low-calorie eating. And then there's the alternate day fasting method, which is 1 day normal, another day 500 calories, next day normal, next day 500 calories. So I use all 3 of those different types of intermittent fasting methods. So week 3 is when we start doing a little keto and we start doing a different 5-2 method. And so that's what week 3 is. Week 4 is rhythm. I call it rhythm because now, after being 3 weeks behind you and into your 4th week, you now have established a groove. And your body is used to it. You're used to it. You've planned it out well. You're going. And then week 5, and by the way, we're still doing our cyclical keto. Now we're still doing our carb loading days and our keto days. And then we get to week 5, which, I think for most people, by the time they've hit week 5, for those who have been in my program on Facebook, they said it's much easier for them now because they now understand the landscape. And so this is your stride. You've hit your stride like a runner. Your heart and your lungs are working together. Your legs feel good. And so you're in your stride. And then our last week is downhill, because there's nothing like running uphill than feeling the great relief of going down. And so you're downhill. You're doing the alternate day fasting. You're still doing your cyclical keto. And that's really the 6 weeks. And people really enjoy the variety of the weeks. No 2 weeks are the same. And I always say to people, even if you didn't like week 3, guess what? It's only 7 days. Week 4 is going to be totally different, and it's a whole different set of challenges, and you may like week 4 much better.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing that. As I was going through the book, I thought that was a really interesting layout there, a way of doing that. I love the way you named them, by the way, the adaptation, conversion, rhythm, stride, and then downhill, taking us home there. You had mentioned folks losing weight. Is that the ideal client avatar here for this program? Is the person who's overweight? Who is this for, and who maybe is it not for?
Yeah. Well, let me start in reverse. It's not for vegans or vegetarians, because you are going to be doing some keto. Okay. And you just simply can't do an effective keto if you're a vegan or vegetarian.
Pretty tough, yeah.
Yeah. Other than that, I got to be honest with you, in our group, we have people from 19 years old to 76. We have the whole range, men, women, all different body types from all over the world who are in our Facebook group. So it really is for everybody. And the beauty of the plan is very customizable. Like, you have options. I don't say you have to have granola and yogurt for breakfast today. I say, here are 2 or 3 options. You choose what works for you. I'm a big believer that in all my plans is that people do like to have some options, and they don't want to have mandates per se. So it really is, it's flexible. It's very affordable. It's regular food. I also am a very big proponent of making my plans accessible to everybody. Everyone doesn't have the kind of discretionary income to afford expensive foods where you got to go to 5 different grocery stores to find these very esoteric ingredients. No, it's available to everybody. So I think that is what's helpful. The other thing I've done, which I've never done before, is I created a workbook for this program. So there's a workbook called the Metflex Diet Workbook that people can buy online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And it's a daily workbook as a companion to the plan. And the amazing thing I will say to you is that accountability is a big part of weight loss. People need to have some form of accountability. And the people who actually purchased the workbook in addition to the book, they have found that doing that workbook 7 minutes a day, that's all it takes. 420 seconds. I say, give me 420 seconds a day and you will have much better results. And they love it. So I do encourage people who are listening to also get the workbook. It's digital or it's paperback. It's very inexpensive, but get the workbook because it allows you to keep track every day of what you're doing, what you're not doing, what's working, what's not.
Okay, fantastic. So folks, this sounds like this is for pretty much everybody. Certainly if you have a weight loss goal, which I know a lot of folks out there listening, that's kind of in your wheelhouse. That's why you're here, right? You're looking for some tips on being healthier, improving body composition. So Dr. Ian, what's on the horizon for you? What's next for you?
So
I know you mentioned your next book, right?
So my next book, believe it or not, is a mystery. It's called The Overnights.
Okay, right. You've got a mystery series there. That's right. So you also write fiction as well as nonfiction.
So I write this Ash Kane series. He's a former Chicago Police Department detective who leaves the department and becomes a private investigator. So it's a fun series. It's becoming a TV show, actually. So the third book comes out at the end of May. It's called The Overnights. The other two books are called Wolf Point and The Unspoken. So I encourage people, if you like fun mysteries, it's a fun time. So I have that happening. I'm developing that. And my other book that was based on Harvard Secret Society is another novel called The Ancient Nine. That's being turned into a TV series also. So I'm working on that development. And then I'm always looking for my next thing. Like I said earlier, I'm really, next year I want to publish this book that is going to help people, particularly over the age of 50, which I am, to help people realize that you can still shred fat and burn and increase your muscle in a very easy way. So it'll be like a 12-week program to help people do that. And so I just stay busy writing and thinking of new things and ways that people can improve themselves.
I love it. Yeah, it sounds like you are a busy guy, and I'd love to have you back next year when you launch that new book. Like I said, that's right up my alley there. All right. Well, Dr. Ian, how can people get in touch with you? You already mentioned the Facebook group. Where do you want to point people to learn more, get in touch with you, all that good stuff?
So just a reminder, the Facebook group is called Flex Diet, the name of the book. Join us. It's free. My Instagram is at Dr. Ian Smith. Spell the doctor out, I-A-N Smith. My Twitter is Dr. Ian Smith, Dr. Ian Smith. And my website, which has all of my stuff on it, is driansmith.com. Spell the doctor out, I-A-N Smith.com. And, I answer my own emails and my own messages, so feel free to reach out to me. If you want to join my MetFlex program, you can also email me, which is iansmithfitbody, iansmithfitbody@gmail.com.
All right, folks, there you go. I will drop all of that into the show notes. You can find that there. So, Dr. Ian, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today and taking the time to share your wisdom and your knowledge and your passion with us. Absolutely love the work you're doing and encourage you to keep up the great work.
It was a pleasure speaking with you today. I hope it helps people.
Okay, that's our show for today, folks. If you've enjoyed this podcast, I want to let you know that we have some great free resources over at silveredgefree.com. There you'll find our free guides with our top tips on nutrition, exercise, and healthy lifestyle to assist you in your weight loss and fitness journey. So feel free to head over there and download anything that looks useful to you. I'll put the links to everything we talked about today in the show notes, and you can find that over at silveredgefitness.com/180. As we wrap up our time together today, you can show your support for this show in two important ways. One is to tell a friend about this podcast and encourage them to give it a listen. The second is for you YouTube folks to click the like and subscribe buttons, and for you podcast folks to consider giving this podcast a 5-star review on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on, and be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss any future episodes. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today, and until next time, stay strong.